They knew it was a trap. They sent them anyway. September 21st, 1944, 9 a.m. Arnhem Bridge. Lieutenant Colonel John Frost watched the German flamethrowers move into position at the end of the street, 50 yards away, close enough to see the crews checking their fuel tanks. His ammunition was gone. His men were down to throwing bricks. 200 wounded soldiers lay in the cellar below him. The building above them was already burning. When the flames reached the basement, they would burn alive. Frost had held this bridge for 88 hours. His orders said 48. He'd held nearly twice as long. And it still wasn't enough. 740 men had reached the bridge with him 4 days ago. Fewer than 100 could still fight. The rest were dead, wounded, or too exhausted to lift a rifle. XXX Corps was supposed to arrive in 2 days. They were still 10 miles away. Frost could hear their artillery in the distance, close enough to hear, too far to save anyone. The flamethrower crews raised their weapons. Frost made the decision, surrender, save the wounded. He couldn't let his men burn to death. This is how Operation Market Garden ended. Not with tanks crossing the Rhine, not with victory by Christmas, but with a British officer surrendering to save 200 men from being burned alive in a Dutch basement. The largest airborne operation in history, the boldest gamble of World War II, a complete disaster. And here's what makes it worse. Every part of this disaster was predicted. Intelligence officers saw it coming. Reconnaissance pilots photographed the evidence. Resistance fighters reported it in real time. The warnings were all there. Someone just had to listen. Let's go back to the beginning, to the warnings they ignored. September 10th, 1944, Bletchley Park, England. The ultra-intelligence decrypt sat on the desk, intercepted German radio traffic, decoded by British cryptanalysts, top secret, eyes only. The message was clear. The 9th SS Panzer Division and 10th SS Panzer Division were moving to the Arnhem area for rest and refit. Tank divisions. Thousands of men, hundreds of armored vehicles. Exactly where the British planned to drop paratroopers. The intelligence officer typed his report. He marked it urgent. He sent it up the chain of command. Ultra-intelligence had won battles before. Commanders trusted it. They would cancel the operation. They had to. The report reached Montgomery's headquarters 3 days later, September 12, 1944, RAF Benson Airfield. The reconnaissance Spitfire landed with fresh photographs. The pilot had flown low over Arnhem, very low. The Germans had nearly shot him down, but he'd gotten the pictures. The photo interpreter spread them across his light table. Woods north of Arnhem. He adjusted his magnifying glass. There, camouflage netting. The distinctive shape underneath. German tanks, Panzer IVs, maybe Panthers. He counted them. More than 30 visible, probably more hidden deeper in the trees. He wrote his report, attached the photographs, sent it to Corps headquarters. These photos would change everything. You can't drop lightly armed paratroopers onto tank divisions. The photographs reached Montgomery's staff the next day, September 14th, 1944. Dutch resistance safe house. The radio operator tapped out his message in Morse code, slow, careful. The Germans were listening. One mistake and direction-finding units would locate him. His message was specific. German armor near Arnhem, unit designations, approximate strength, location coordinates. The resistance had watchers throughout Holland. They knew what the Germans were doing. They knew the British were planning something. They could see the preparations. They wanted to help. The message reached British intelligence within hours. September 15th, 1944, Montgomery's headquarters. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery stood over the maps. His entire staff was there. Intelligence officers, planning officers, his chief of staff. The ultra-decrypt was on his desk. The reconnaissance photographs were spread across the table. The Dutch resistance reports were in a folder. Major Brian Urquhart, the intelligence officer, stood at attention. No relation to Roy Urquhart. Different man, same concerns. He pointed to the evidence. The ultra-intercepts showing 2 panzer divisions. The aerial photographs showing tanks. The resistance reports confirming both. Sir, the Germans have significant armor near Arnhem. We should reconsider the drop zones, or postpone until we can, Montgomery cut him off. The intelligence is exaggerated. These are remnants, depleted units, refitting. They won't be combat effective for days. Sir, the photographs show vehicles in woods. Could be anything, could be trucks. The Ultra Decrypt specifically mentions panzer divisions. Montgomery walked to the window. Outside, transport planes were being loaded, thousands of paratroopers preparing to board. The largest airborne operation in history. He'd promised Eisenhower this would work. He'd staked his reputation on it. The Americans were racing across France. Patton was getting all the glory, all the supplies. This operation would change that. British tanks would cross the Rhine, drive into Germany, end the war by Christmas. I've faced worse odds. We broke through at Alamein when everyone said it was impossible. We'll break through here. He believed it. That was the dangerous part. Montgomery wasn't lying to his staff. He was lying to himself. Major Urquhart tried once more. Sir, if the panzers are there, they won't be, and even if they are, we'll deal with them. The plan proceeds as scheduled. Silence filled the room. Montgomery turned back to his maps. Dismissed. The intelligence officer gathered his reports. The Ultra Decrypt, the photographs, the resistance warnings, all of it ignored. He walked out of the headquarters. The next day, his commanding officer suggested he take some sick leave for stress. The medical officer agreed. Major Brian Urquhart was sent away for the crime of being right. 3 days later, 10,000 British paratroopers would drop into Arnhem, into exactly the trap the intelligence had predicted. September 17th, 1944. 12:30 p.m. transport plane over Holland. Major General Roy Urquhart sat in the C-47. His stomach lurched as the plane hit turbulence. 43 years old, an infantry officer who got airsick, now commanding 10,000 paratroopers in the deepest drop of the war. He'd read the intelligence reports, the concerns about panzer divisions, the photographs. He'd raised questions in the final briefing. Montgomery had waved them off. "We've faced worse, Roy. This will work." Urquhart wanted to believe him. Montgomery was a field marshal. He'd won at Alamein, planned Normandy. Who was Urquhart to question? But the knot in his stomach wasn't just from the air sickness. It was from math that didn't add up. 8 miles from drop zones to the bridge, 1 lift per day, a single narrow road for XXX Corps. Too many assumptions, too many things that had to go perfectly right. The green light flashed. Time to jump. Urquhart stepped into the sky over Holland, into his own worst-case scenario. Hour 1 p.m., the drop zones. The landing was perfect. Clear skies, light wind. Paratroopers hit their zones almost exactly. Gliders landed intact. The largest airborne operation in history was unfolding flawlessly. On the ground, Lieutenant Colonel John Frost assembled his battalion, 740 men, 2nd Parachute Battalion. Their objective was simple: the bridge at Arnhem, 8 miles east. Frost had led the Bruneval raid, 13 men against a German radar station, perfect execution. Everyone remembered Bruneval. This felt different, not a raid, a siege. Frost knew the difference. His orders were to take the bridge and hold for 48 hours. XXX Corps would arrive from the south, relieving force, tanks and infantry. 48 hours, that was the promise. Frost's battalion began their march toward Arnhem. Hour 4 p.m., SS Panzer Headquarters. SS Brigade Führer Wilhelm Bittrich watched British paratroopers landing from his headquarters window, 8 miles away, close enough to see the parachutes filling the sky. 4 hours ago, his panzer divisions were resting, refitting, recovering from France. Now British paratroopers were dropping on top of him. The British intelligence failure was staggering. If they knew about his tanks, they never would have dropped here. Bittrich gave orders immediately. Move the armor, seal off the British, destroy them before they organize. His staff protested. The tanks weren't ready. Low on fuel, maintenance incomplete. Move what we have, now. The British are lightly armed. We have 4 hours before they reach the bridges. The panzers began rolling toward Arnhem. The intelligence had been right. Montgomery had been wrong. And 740 British paratroopers were about to find out. Hour 7, 8 p.m., Arnhem Bridge. Frost stood at the north end of the bridge. His battalion had made it, 8 miles through enemy territory. They'd fought through German positions, lost men. But they'd reached their objective. The bridge stretched across the Rhine, massive, steel and concrete, beautiful in the fading light. His men dug in around the northern approach. They controlled half the bridge. The Germans held the south. Frost checked his watch. Hour 7, ahead of schedule. XXX Corps would arrive in 41 hours. His battalion just had to hold. Then his radio crackled. Message from division headquarters. 2nd and 3rd Battalions stopped. Heavy resistance. Unable to proceed to bridge. Frost stared at the radio. The entire brigade was supposed to take the bridge. 3 battalions, 2,000 men. He had 740. Understood. We'll hold until relieved. Frost looked at his officers. They understood what this meant. They were alone, deep behind enemy lines, holding half a bridge, waiting for an army that was supposed to be here in 41 hours. Hour 12, 1 a.m., September 18th, Dutch attic. Urquhart crouched in a Dutch family's attic. 2 of his officers with him. No radio, no contact with headquarters. He'd been separated during a German ambush 6 hours ago. Now he was hiding. His division was fighting without him below. He could hear gunfire, explosions, his men dying. He'd commanded infantry for 20 years, always at the front, always with his men. Now he was trapped in an attic, useless. And the worst part? The intelligence had been right. The photographs showing tanks, the ultra decrypt, the resistance reports. All of it accurate, all of it ignored. Urquhart had raised concerns. Montgomery dismissed them. Now 10,000 men were paying the price. Being right didn't matter when your men were dying. Hour 24, 1 p.m., September 18th, XXX Corps front line. Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks watched his tanks inch forward. One narrow road, barely wide enough for 2 vehicles. Trees on both sides, perfect ambush terrain. The Germans called it the club route. Destroy the lead tank, and the entire column stops. A German anti-tank gun fired from the tree line. The lead Sherman exploded. Flames, black smoke. The column halted. Engineers worked to clear the wreckage. Push the burning tank off the road. 30 minutes. Another tank moved forward. Another anti-tank gun. Another explosion. Another delay. Horrocks checked his map. They'd advanced 12 miles in 24 hours. The plan called for reaching Eindhoven by now. They were barely into Holland. 64 miles to Arnhem. At this rate, they'd never make it. At Arnhem Bridge, Frost's men were waiting for tanks that were stuck 10 miles into a 64-mile advance. The plan was unraveling, exactly as the intelligence predicted. Hour 30, 7 p.m., Arnhem Bridge. Frost heard them before he saw them, the distinctive rumble of tank engines, heavy armor, getting closer. Then they appeared, German Panthers, massive, unstoppable, rolling toward his position. The reconnaissance photographs had been right. The tanks were here. They'd always been here. Frost's battalion had 1 anti-tank gun, 1, against German heavy armor. The 1st Panzer fired. The shell hit a building. Brick and mortar exploded. 3 British soldiers died instantly. The bombardment had begun. Frost grabbed his radio. Request immediate air support, anti-tank weapons, reinforcements. The reply came back. Negative. No support available. Division surrounded. You are on your own. 740 paratroopers, holding a bridge, against SS Panzer divisions. The intelligence was right. The warnings were accurate. And now men were dying because no one listened. September 19th, 1944, 1 p.m., Arnhem Bridge, hour 48. The deadline had passed. XXX Corps hadn't arrived. Frost stood in what remained of battalion headquarters. Every building around the bridge was burning. German tanks fired point blank. The paratroopers fired back with rifles. Small arms against armor. It wasn't a fight, it was execution. Half his men were dead or wounded. The battalion surgeon was amputating limbs with a kitchen knife in the basement. No morphine, no anesthetic, just whiskey and screaming. Frost had led the Bruneval raid. 13 men, perfect planning, minimal casualties. Everyone came home. This was different. He'd done everything right, reached the objective, held the bridge, followed orders exactly. And it still wasn't enough. Because the plan was built on intelligence that Montgomery refused to believe. A young lieutenant approached, 22 years old, face blackened with smoke. "Sir, what do we do when the ammunition runs out?" Frost looked at him. The same question Frost had been asking himself for 12 hours. "We hold anyway, Lieutenant." The young officer nodded, went back to his position, because that's what soldiers do. They follow orders. Even when the orders are based on lies commanders tell themselves. Hour 52, 5 p.m., 10 miles south, Nijmegen. XXX Corps had finally reached Nijmegen, but the bridge over the Waal River was still in German hands. The road to Arnhem was blocked. Major Julian Cook of the 82nd Airborne studied the river. 400 yards of fast-moving water, German machine guns on both banks. His orders were insane. Cross the Waal in canvas boats, in daylight, under fire. Take the northern end of the bridge. The boats had arrived that morning, 26 of them, built for training exercises, not for combat assault crossings under machine gun fire. Cook's battalion loaded into the boats. 300 men, most had never been in a boat before. They paddled into the current. German machine guns opened fire immediately. Mortars fell among the boats. The Waal turned into a killing field. Men died in the water. Boats capsized. Some drowned in their gear. Others kept paddling. Because stopping meant dying. Half the boats made it across. Cook's survivors hit the northern bank and charged. No cover, no support, just American paratroopers running at German machine gun positions. Hand-to-hand fighting, bayonets, grenades, desperation. By 7 p.m., they'd taken the northern approach. British tanks rolled across the Nijmegen Bridge. The road to Arnhem was open, 10 miles to go. Cook stood on the bank, soaking wet. Half his battalion dead in the river behind him. British tanks rumbled past. Finally, heading north to save Frost's men. Then the tank stopped. Cook stared. "Why are we stopping?" A British tank commander climbed out of his turret. "Orders from Corps. Consolidate for the night. Resume advance at dawn." "Dawn? We just lost half a battalion crossing that river. You're 10 miles from Arnhem." "I don't make the orders, Major. I follow them." Cook watched the tank crews park for the night, making tea, setting up camp. 10 miles away, British paratroopers were dying, waiting for relief that had stopped for tea. The Americans had done the impossible, crossed a river under fire, opened the road, and British caution was wasting it. Hour 76, 5 p.m., September 20th, south of the Rhine. The Polish parachute brigade dropped into hell. Major General Stanisław Sosabowski watched from his transport plane. 1,500 Polish paratroopers jumping into German machine gun fire. The drop zones were wrong. The intelligence was wrong. Everything was wrong. Sosabowski had protested the plan in briefings. The drop zones were exposed. The Germans would see them coming. His men would be slaughtered. Montgomery's staff dismissed his concerns. The Poles worry too much. Now Sosabowski watched his men die, some shot in their parachutes, others killed before they hit the ground. The few hundred who survived scattered into the woods. They were supposed to reinforce Frost, cross the Rhine, turn the tide. Instead, they were pinned down, surrounded. Another unit that couldn't help because the planning was based on optimism instead of intelligence. The pattern was complete. British paratroopers surrounded at Arnhem. American paratroopers dying to open a road, Polish paratroopers massacred on landing, all because one man refused to believe his own intelligence officers. Hour 80, 9 p.m., Arnhem Bridge. Frost counted his ammunition. 3 magazines left, maybe 50 rounds total. Around him, his men scavenged bullets from the dead, British, German, anyone. A bullet is a bullet when you're down to your last few. He could hear XXX Corps artillery, 10 miles south, maybe less, close enough to hear, too far to save anyone. The math was simple now. Not enough ammunition, not enough men, not enough time. Frost had held for 80 hours, orders said 48. He'd held nearly twice as long, done everything possible, led brilliantly under impossible circumstances. And it wasn't enough. Because brilliant tactics can't overcome bad strategy, and bad strategy can't overcome ignored intelligence. A sergeant approached. "Sir, the ammunition." "I know." "What do we tell the men?" Frost looked at the ruins around him. Buildings burning, bodies in the streets. His battalion, his magnificent battalion, ground down to nothing. Tell them we hold until we can't hold anymore. Tell them they've done everything right. Tell them this isn't their fault. The sergeant understood. This was a command failure, a planning failure, an intelligence failure. The soldiers had done everything asked of them, and they were going to die anyway, because someone at headquarters was too proud to admit he might be wrong. Hour 84, 1 a.m., September 21st. The ammunition was gone. Frost's men threw bricks, stones, anything. German tanks systematically destroyed every building, one by one, methodical, professional. The end was coming, not because Frost's men failed, because the plan was never going to work. The intelligence said so, the reconnaissance said so, the Dutch resistance said so. Everyone knew, except the man who mattered. And now 740 men were paying the price for one man's arrogance. September 21st, 1944, 9 a.m., Arnhem Bridge, hour 84. The German flamethrower crews moved into position, 50 yards away. Frost could see them checking their fuel connections, adjusting their aim. The building above the basement was already burning. 200 wounded men lay in the cellar below, British and German. The medics had stopped distinguishing. When the flames reached the basement, they would all burn alive. Frost sat against a wall, both legs wounded. He'd refused morphine for 3 days, needed to stay alert, stay in command, but the pain was too much now. His second in command was dead, his radio operator was dead, most of his officers were dead. Of the 740 men who'd reached the bridge, fewer than 100 could still fight. A captain knelt beside him. "Sir, the flamethrowers?" Frost looked at the burning building, at the basement full of wounded, at his men with no ammunition left. He'd held for 88 hours, nearly twice the deadline, done everything possible, led brilliantly, fought impossibly hard, and none of it mattered, because the plan was built on a lie, Montgomery told himself. "White flag," Frost said quietly. The captain stared. "Sir? Raise a white flag. We're surrendering. I won't let those men burn." The captain's hand trembled as he saluted, not from fear, from exhaustion, from 3 days and nights of continuous fighting for a bridge that relief never came to cross. The white flag went up. German soldiers approached cautiously. They'd fought these paratroopers for 4 days. They knew what these men were capable of. An SS officer reached Frost's position. He looked at the wounded British colonel, at the ruins around him, at the bodies in the streets. "You held well," the German said in English. Frost said nothing. There was nothing to say. German medics helped evacuate the wounded. British and German soldiers worked together to carry stretchers from the burning building. Even in war, some humanity remains. Frost was carried out on a stretcher. Behind him, Arnhem Bridge still stood, intact, uncrossed, useless. He'd held it for 88 hours. The plan said XXX Corps would arrive in 48. Simple math, simple failure. Hour 200, September 25th, 9 p.m., Oosterbeek. Major General Roy Urquhart sat in what remained of his headquarters. 3,000 men surrounded him, all that was left of 10,000. The radio message from Corps was clear. Withdraw tonight. Operation Market Garden was over. Urquhart had escaped the attic, returned to command, fought for 6 more days, none of it enough. He'd been right to question the plan. The intelligence officers had been right. The reconnaissance pilots had been right. The Dutch resistance had been right. Everyone was right except Montgomery, and Montgomery was the only one who mattered. Urquhart gave the evacuation order. Abandon positions, move to the river, cross under darkness, leave the wounded behind. There was no choice. The men moved in silence. No lights, no talking. They crawled through German positions. Some were caught, shot. Others made it to the riverbank. The Rhine was 400 yards of cold, fast water. Engineers had boats for some. The rest had to swim. In darkness. In rain. Under German fire. Men drowned. Others were shot in the water. The lucky ones reached the southern bank, exhausted, hypothermic, broken. By dawn on September 26th, it was over. Just over 2,000 men made it out. More than 7,000 didn't. The bridge at Arnhem remained in German hands. The war wouldn't end by Christmas. It would continue for 8 more months. Hundreds of thousands more would die. Montgomery's gamble had failed, not because soldiers failed, not because plans went slightly wrong, because one man refused to believe intelligence that contradicted what he wanted to be true. And 7,000 men paid the price for that refusal. The numbers tell the story. 10,000 British paratroopers dropped at Arnhem, just over 2,000 returned, 78% casualties, the highest loss rate of any major Allied operation in World War II. The 1st Airborne Division ceased to exist as a fighting unit. It was never rebuilt. Lieutenant Colonel John Frost spent the rest of the war in a German prison camp, his wounds never fully healed. After the war, he returned to painting. He rarely spoke about Arnhem. When he did, he never blamed his men. Major General Roy Urquhart wrote a detailed report. He blamed the drop zones, the single road, the ignored intelligence. He blamed the plan. The report was classified for 30 years. Too embarrassing, too honest. Field Marshal Montgomery never accepted responsibility. He called Market Garden 90% successful. We got Eindhoven and Nijmegen. Only Arnhem failed, as if 7,000 casualties were a rounding error. Major Brian Urquhart, the intelligence officer who tried to stop the operation, returned from his forced sick leave after the battle ended. No one apologized. His career never recovered. The warnings were all there. Ultra-intelligence showing SS Panzer divisions, aerial photographs of tanks in the woods, Dutch resistance reports with unit positions and strengths, intelligence officers begging for reconsideration. All of it on Montgomery's desk, all of it dismissed, not because he didn't see them, because believing them meant admitting his plan might fail, and Montgomery needed this plan to succeed more than he needed to listen. 10,000 men dropped into Arnhem. The intelligence said it was a trap. Montgomery said it wasn't. The intelligence was right. In 1977, 33 years later, the Dutch renamed the bridge, the John Frost Bridge, a monument to men who held the impossible for 88 hours. The memorial doesn't mention Montgomery. It doesn't mention the ignored warnings. It doesn't mention the intelligence officers who were right. It doesn't mention Major Brian Urquhart being sent away for telling the truth. It just lists names. 740 men who reached a bridge, fewer than 100 who walked away. That's what's left when commanders refuse to listen. Names on stone, questions never answered, and one lesson that keeps getting forgotten. Intelligence doesn't fail, plans don't fail, people who are too proud to admit they might be wrong, too invested to change course, too important to be questioned. Frost held for 88 hours. His orders said 48. He did everything right. It wasn't enough, because courage can't overcome arrogance, and soldiers can't fix what generals break. They knew it was a trap. The intelligence officers knew, the reconnaissance pilots knew, the Dutch resistance knew, everyone knew, except the one man who needed to listen, and 7,000 men paid for one man's certainty. This is the War Maestro Chronicles, ignored warnings, preventable disasters, the stories they don't teach. Subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.